Hey you guys, this video is going to be something a little bit different today. I am asked all the time what my favorite true crime documentaries are. So here are my top 5 favorite true crime documentaries ever in no specific order because they are all fantastic and compelling. We will start with Into the Abyss. This 2011 documentary follows Michael Perry and Jason Burkett, who in 2001 committed a triple homicide in Conroe, Texas, all to steal a car. In the documentary, Michael Perry is on death row, whereas Jason Burkett is only serving a life sentence. There is a ton of police footage of the crime scenes that is super eerie. They talk to Michael Perry on death row, they interview Jason Burkett while serving his life sentence. They talk to Jason's dad, who is also in prison, and many other members of the community. There are still shots of police reports, and something that really captivated me about this film is you get to see how these people live. It's just so different from how I was brought up. Education isn't prominent, people are living in campers. It's like a glimpse into a completely different world. I remember the first time I saw this documentary, actually. My dad was watching it in the living room when I still lived at home, and I think I just caught a glimpse of it and had to sit down. This is the documentary that made me fall in love with documentaries. You can find Into the Abyss free online. I'll link it below. Actually, the first documentary that made me fall in love with documentaries was actually Zeitgeist when I was 16. But I'm pretty sure they've debunked all of that by now. But Zeitgeist was unbelievably entertaining to a super stoned 16-year-old. Anyway, moving on. Have You Seen Andy? This 2003 documentary is about 10-year-old Andy Puglisi, who vanished from a swimming pool in Lawrence, Massachusetts in August of 1976. Andy's childhood friend Melanie Perkins actually directed the film. It's actually insane how she finds out how there's a massive pedophile ring in Lawrence, Massachusetts. There is disturbing audio clips of a notorious sex offender. It's bizarre. Much like Into the Abyss, this film shows you a glimpse into a world you never thought possible. How can people like this exist and in such large numbers? I know I said these are in no specific order, but Have You Seen Andy might be my favorite documentary. You can find Have You Seen Andy on Crave and Apple TV. Paradise Lost, The Child Murders at Robin Hood Hills. Paradise Lost is a 1996 documentary that follows the trials of 3 teenagers, Damien Eccles, Jason Baldwin, and Jesse Misskelley Jr. These 3 would be dubbed the West Memphis 3, and they were accused of murdering and sexually mutilating 3 8-year-old boys in 1993. These teens were accused of murder pretty much because they wore black, liked metal, and Damien had an interest in occult. He was familiar with the works of Aleister Crowley and assumed to be a part of a satanic cult. They were accused based on their appearance and interests, and it does not help that West Memphis is in the Bible Belt. On the Bible Belt, very religious. There are 3 documentaries in this series. The sequel, Revelations, came out in 2000, and the third and final part, Purgatory, came out in 2011 when Damien Eccles was finally released from prison. I follow Damien on Twitter and Instagram, and to this day, he still is trying to find out who really murdered those 3 little boys. He's also just a very interesting person to follow. I would highly recommend following him. I'll link his Twitter below. You can find Paradise Lost on HBO and Crave. Goodnight Sugar Babe, The Killing of Vera Jo Regal. This documentary may be one of the most disturbing I've ever seen. Again, it's hard to believe that people like this exist, but they walk among us. Goodnight Sugar Babe is a 2013 documentary that follows and interviews maybe the worst family to ever exist. They are complete backwoods, inbred, like cousins marrying cousins, untouched by modern dentistry, evil, awful people. In Findlay, Ohio, Vera Jo was a young woman with the cognitive therapy of about an 8-year-old. At 19 years old, she would meet and start dating a 13-year-old boy named Zachary Brooks. Vera would move in with Zachary and his family shortly after they started dating. Zachary's mother, Sherry Brooks, is the ringleader and mastermind of everything evil that goes on in that house. Sherry herself had all of her children taken away from her for sexually abusing them and had this weird obsession with baby girls. She encouraged this relationship between 13-year-old Zachary and 19-year-old Vera so that she could get a baby out of it. Vera would become pregnant, and Sherry would force her to drink castor oil to induce labor a month early so that the baby would have the same birthday as Sherry. Vera was abused in every way possible, physically, mentally, psychologically. Sherry would not let Vera hold her own baby. Sherry named the baby and would tell people it was her child. Sherry would collect Vera's disability checks and made Vera a slave. Vera would even encourage her children to beat and torture Vera as well. Despite many people knowing about and even reporting the abuse, Vera Jo ends up being brutally murdered. You can find Goodnight Sugar Babe on Amazon Prime and also the full-length version on YouTube as well. This documentary is not for the faint of heart, so be warned. And last but definitely not least, we have Just Marvin, Just Evil. I found this full-length documentary on YouTube, and much like Goodnight Sugar Babe, my jaw was on the floor for the entire 96 minutes. This 2000 film is directed by a man named James Ronald Whitney, who is the step-grandson of a man named Marvin Just. Marvin Just sexually abused at least 10 of his children and stepchildren. He is also believed to have raped and murdered a nurse who caught him in bed with one of his children. Throughout the documentary, the director interviews his aunts, uncles, cousins, parents, grandparents, and you can really see the ripple effect of severe childhood abuse. Many of his relatives suffer from substance abuse and homelessness. He interviews one of his uncles who lives in a camper, and this man asked two of his half-sisters to live with him as his wife. They were both like, no thanks. And when James, the director, was like, those are your sisters, this guy's like, well, what happens between two consenting adults is fine. Oh, so gross. Marvin himself is also interviewed and called out by his step-grandson. It is just unbelievable. Although I highly recommend this documentary, it's another one that is not for the faint of heart. So those are my top 5. Check them out. Let me know what you think. Let me know what your favorite true crime documentary is, and I will check it out. But other than that, I will catch you guys on Tuesday. Later.